Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a piece of history that is absolutely fascinating, but honestly, rarely ever talked about. You know, we usually study World War II through the lens of grand strategies, famous generals, and these massive, sweeping battles. But today, we're going to look at the stark logistical and moral differences between how the American and German militaries handled their fallen. It's an incredible story of systems, of promises, and really, of what happens after the guns finally stop firing. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so let's jump right in by placing ourselves right on the bluffs of Omaha Beach. It's June 10th, 1944, literally just days after D-Day. A German prisoner named Wilhelm is handed a shovel, and he's told to dig. Now, Wilhelm had been on the Eastern Front. He had definitely seen bodies before. But what gave him absolute visceral shock right here wasn't the bodies themselves. No, it was what the Americans were actually doing with them. He's watching this team of American soldiers in clean uniforms wearing rubber gloves working at a row of tables under a canvas awning. And he realizes they weren't just burying men, they were processing them with this absolute unflinching precision.
As Wilhelm and his fellow prisoners just stood there with their shovels, this profound realization kind of washed over them. There's an account that perfectly captures this feeling. It says, they were not watching a funeral. They were watching a machine built on a single proposition that a dead man still has a name. What truly haunted those German prisoners wasn't the tragedy of death itself, but witnessing this industrial-scale promise in action. The American military had literally built a comprehensive system to ensure that absolutely no soldier would ever become unknown.
Section 1. Graves Registration. The American Machine. What's truly astounding about the 607th Quartermaster Graves Registration Company and their stripping line is its sheer methodical nature. I mean, this wasn't just improvised on the spot. First, they'd remove any live ordnance, unpinned grenades or loose rounds, because an accidental explosion would kill the very men trying to honor the fallen. Next came the identification. There was a sergeant nicknamed Gruesome. They called him that because he literally never looked away from the grim task. And he would use a specialized stripping knife to carefully cut open pockets. He was looking for a wallet, a letter, a dog tag, anything. And if the tags were missing, they went deeper. They'd ink all 10 fingerprints onto a card. They sketched out the soldier's teeth for dental charts. They even checked for laundry marks and tattoos. They were incredibly meticulous.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the whole mindset of the U.S. military at the time. Once a soldier was identified, a clerk filled out a report of burial. But they didn't just jot down the info with a pen. They actually took the metal dog tag, put it into a machine, and stamped the impression directly onto the government paper. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some flimsy handwritten note that was going to smudge or fade in the rain. This was an industrial-grade record. The U.S. military applied the exact same logistical seriousness to recording their dead as they did to moving ammunition and fuel straight to the front lines.
Section 2. The German System, a broken process.
So to understand why those German POWs were so shaken, we have to look at the broken system they were used to. Germany actually invented military identification tags way back in the 19th century. And as you can see here, in 1939, their zinc identification disc system, the Erkennungsmarke, was working efficiently. If a soldier fell, the tag was snapped in half. One piece stayed with the body, the other went to headquarters, and the family got a letter. Simple, right? But in 1941, during Operation Barbarossa, the sheer volume of casualties and the crazy rapid pace of the advance caused the system to crack. Fast forward to 1943, with the army in full retreat on the Eastern Front, and the system broke entirely. Add to that the regime's shame over the catastrophic death toll, and they simply stopped reporting the dead accurately. Instead, soldiers were just conveniently labeled missing. It became a policy of absolute silence.
Section 3. Letters Home. Two Different Fates.
Now this is where the emotional toll really hits home. It's this agonizing micro-contrast. Picture an American widow in Ohio. She would receive a carefully wrapped package from this massive centralized depot in Kansas City, a depot that processed an astounding 280,000 personal effects, by the way. Inside, she'd find his watch, his wallet, maybe even the very last letter she ever wrote him. She had closure. Meanwhile, you look at a German daughter, like a girl named Kittel, whose story is actually in the records, and she would receive a single piece of paper stamped vermisst, meaning missing. No grave location, no personal effects, just decades of crushing, unresolved silence.
There's this incredibly powerful account from a German non-commissioned officer who was watching an American team work. He watched the sergeant pull a photograph of a young woman from a dead American soldier's wallet. The sergeant paused, studied it, and then gently placed it into an effects bag to be sent home. Seeing this, the German NCO immediately thought of his own brother who had been killed the previous summer and from whom absolutely nothing was ever sent home. He said, "That was the moment the war ended for me, when I watched an American sergeant handle a dead stranger's photograph as though it mattered."
Section 4. Winter 1944. Thawing fingers.
Let's move to the bitter winter of 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge, where the American system faced its ultimate logistical test. The ground was frozen solid, and here's a visceral detail that truly highlights their dedication. When a body freezes, the fingers become completely rigid and the skin contracts. It makes fingerprints totally unreadable. So what did they do? American sergeants literally carried the fallen into heated farmhouses. They sat by fires, physically holding the dead soldiers' hands, just waiting for their frozen fingers to thaw out enough so their prints could be inked. The German prisoners watched this happen. They saw firsthand that the American system made absolutely no exceptions, not even in the middle of a massive winter offensive.
And the crazy thing is, it went way beyond just identification. Take the Malmedy massacre, where 84 American soldiers were murdered by the SS. When the ground was finally retaken, the graves registration teams didn't just quickly bury them. They photographed every single body in the snow. They mapped the exact layout of the field, recorded bullet trajectories, and noted resting positions. They built a permanent evidentiary record. This meticulous documentation served the families, of course, but it also served history and justice. It totally reinforced the profound accountability of the American system to the watching world.
Section 5. Return of the Dead. A monumental choice.
After the war, the American military did something no nation in human history had ever even attempted. Every single American next of kin received a letter asking a simple, yet monumental question. What do you want us to do with your son? Families could choose to have their loved ones remain in a permanent overseas cemetery, or they could be brought home at government expense. 60% of families chose to have their loved ones brought back. Between 1947 and 1951, the U.S. shipped 171,000 dead from 6 continents back home. That's an effort that costs the equivalent of over $2 billion today.
Now I want you to let this number sink in for a second. 1.3 million. That is the number of German soldiers who vanished entirely during the Second World War. No letter, no grave, no dog tag returned. Just gone. Erased completely by their own broken, silenced system. But then you flip the script and contrast that tragedy with this number right here, 97%. Out of 280,000 American dead recovered worldwide, the U.S. Graves Registration Service achieved an incredible positive identification rate of 97%. Let me repeat that. 97 out of every 100 dead men pulled from beaches, forests, and frozen fields were given back their names. It is an absolutely staggering achievement.
Section 6. 2 Cemeteries, a tale of contrasts.
To really bring this all together, let's look at how this history lives on today. If you go to Margarten in the Netherlands, you'll find an American cemetery with these pristine white marble crosses. And what's incredible is that every single grave has been adopted by a local Dutch family. They bring flowers, they research the soldier's life. There is literally a 700-person waiting list just for the privilege of adopting a grave. Now, just a few miles away at Le Combe in France, a German cemetery holds dark, flat, shared stones. It's carefully maintained by a commission, sure, but there are no personal family adoptions, and thousands of those graves simply say unknown. You see, the Dutch could only adopt the American graves because the American system ensured that there was a specific name, a specific file, and a specific story attached to every single cross.
So, it all really boils down to this one final question. What does a system's treatment of its dead reveal about the value it places on the living? As we've seen throughout this explainer, the logistics, the forms, the stripping knives, the fingerprinting, none of that was just bureaucracy. It was the physical manifestation of a nation's belief that every single life mattered enough to be named, recorded, and sent home. It's a profound reflection on how a nation's logistical choices ultimately expose its deepest values. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. I hope you found this explainer as eye-opening as I did. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.